Thank you, Cesar. Or I think we'll call you DJ Cesar from now on. And thank you for Ruby. Is she with us? That was a fantastic selection of music. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as we always say, wherever you are in the world. Want to thank you for joining us for this Global Chamber meeting. There were some of you who were in the meeting in the previous hour, so I want to thank you for being with us. We are having a fascinating conversation today on trade opportunities in Africa and specifically Kenya. But I think this is a conversation that applies to all of us here in Africa. And I just want to tell you a little bit, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with the Global Chamber, of which I am the executive director here in Nairobi, Kenya. We provide business services and connections to organizations who are either currently or even considering doing business across borders. This could be by state, it could be by industry, it could be by country. And through the activities of the Global Chamber, like this conversation we're having today, webinars, we help lower the risk that's associated with some of this cross-border business or cross-border trade. And we do this by providing our members, those of us who are members of the Global Chamber, as well as our other associates, a connection. And we actually call them warm connections, and a platform so that they can engage with business leaders across the world. So we're really excited to have you. We had a great conversation here about a month ago to do with how we can help our businesses become even better. And so this is just carrying on for that conversation. We have a wonderful speaker today who I'm going to introduce shortly. But before we do that, I'm just going to allow Doug just to say a few words from Arizona, just a brief introduction. And if there are any other executive directors, I'm trying to look at my Zoom screen here, who are on the call, who can just briefly unmute and introduce themselves from whichever country or city they may be coming from. And then we'll get straight to our speaker of the day. And we'll have him speak for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and conversations to involve all of us. So Doug, maybe a few words from you.
My recommendation is that's served me in 40 years of marriage, ladies first. And so I see two executive directors, Adesola Debbie, and also Ruby Golo might be available. She's in the call, and she may or may not be able to speak. Debbie Adesola, would you like to go first and just introduce yourself?
Thank you, though. Hi, everyone. My name is Adesola Debbie Daramola. I'm the Executive Director for Global Chambers Nigeria, and it's been a wonderful one being with Global Chamber. And I think we should all give Doug a real hand of applause for doing a great job, for his passion for making everyone come together, trying to connect businesses all over the world to grow and to network. Thank you, Doug, for the opportunity. And it would be nice to have members here to join us on Saturday for our event, and also to be members. If you are in Nigeria and you're here, please join us to be a member. Thank you very much, Derek, too, for the opportunity to talk. I will look forward to an interesting moment here today. Thank you.
So check out that event on Saturday for sure. And we'll have Comey and others speaking. Nihi is on the call. He'll be speaking as well about investment opportunities in Nigeria. I think all of us want to be able to dance as well as Debbie Adesola as well. So it was great to see you getting into that music. And we definitely need to find that information from Ruby Golo on who that was. That was outstanding. Ruby, just in case, I want to open it up. Are you available or are you tied up? And maybe not be available. And she told us she wasn't going to be able to. So back to you, Derek. We appreciate what you do from Nairobi, Kenya. It's such a critically important region of the world, and just so happy that the elections ended up being positive, and coming out of it now, it's a great opportunity, to your point, around small businesses, focus in on success, and we look forward to supporting you and our members and the country and the region as well as we can. So we look forward to the conversation today. Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you very much, Doug. So I'm just going to go ahead. I actually had the speaker's bio right in front of me, but it seems to have disappeared. But nevertheless, I'll go ahead and introduce him. We are delighted to have been able to get the services of this very busy man. He's all over the media, giving interviews. The gentleman is Victor Otieno, who's the managing director of VIFA Consult, and his specialty is really talking about SMEs and how we can drive business, how we can grow business for the SME sector. He has a lot of experience in this particular area. He speaks about this a lot. He's on all the business channels, certainly here in Kenya and around Africa. And I thought he would be the perfect person to speak about this really exciting trade initiative that came up this year between the US and Africa. Doug, you mentioned the elections, which we've just had here in Kenya. And we're lucky that everything has gone peacefully. But I think one of the key things about this particular election, Victor might even echo this particular point, is that the issues that drove this election didn't have to do so much with the particular part of the country people came from. It wasn't driven by ethnicity, it wasn't driven by regional politics, but it was actually driven by the economy, which was, I think, different this time around. And particularly, the winning candidate, our new president-elect, really was talking about how he is going to make it a priority to drive the SME sector, to provide incentives, to provide that kind of government support. And as I mentioned before in the previous hour, I've just come off a 3-day sort of boot camp for organizations like mine and the Global Chamber, where we help SMEs. And really, in fact, this was a program that was driven by the United Nations. So I'm passionate about the SME sector. I know Victor is, and he's going to talk a little bit more about how this trade agreement is going to affect the SME sector, but not just the SME sector, of course, across the board, all the different sectors. So Victor, I'm going to turn the mic to you, give you the floor. Please take it away. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you can virtually welcome our speaker for the day, Victor Otieno.
Thank you very much, Derek, and good evening, good morning, good night, depending with where you are. As Derek has introduced me, my name is Victor Otieno. I'm the Managing Director of VIFA Consult, which is our research as well as consultancy focusing on MSMEs or SMEs, depending with the term that you're comfortable with, as well as startups. One is supporting ESOs across Kenya as well as the continent. So ESOs, for those who are not aware, are enterprise support organizations. So what these organizations do is they support SMEs directly. So we use research, we use data, we use evidence to enable their programming to resonate with the reality of SMEs. And I can give you an example. For example, currently we know that, for instance, in Kenya, the people we call SMEs are informal in nature. So a lot of interventions that come towards Africa, comes towards Kenya, are informal in nature. SMEs are formal. So we use the data that we have to allow you to be able to have a sharper focus on SMEs. That's number one. Our second level of research is on policy. because we realize also, yes, you can give direct support to SMEs through training, capacity building, consultancies, etc. But the challenge that most SMEs in Africa face are more of systemic challenges. So these are challenges that are beyond the purview of control, and this, of course, touches on policy. So again, government, to a large degree, in terms of intervention, doesn't have the sharpness of data. In Kenya, for instance, the last data collection that was done for small business was 2016. So if you are using 2016 data to inform intervention or policy towards SMEs, things might have shifted in the ground. So that would basically mean that the kind of interventions that you put out might not resonate and might not augur well with SMEs. And we saw this play out, during COVID, where different governments were putting out economic stimulus programs. So in Kenya, again, that was put out. We had three. The first one being 2020, second one coming 2021, another almost towards the end. And of course, it's carrying on under what is called the economic recovery strategy. If you look at the actual intervention, it actually missed the mark, and we see SMEs continue to struggle. So our data, our research focuses on giving alternative policy position to allow government to have options in terms of interventions. So, of course, as part of the work that we do a lot of commentary, we do a lot of public participation and conversations around policy, directly speaking with SMEs, speaking to startups, speaking to different ESOs, organizations such as the Global Chamber, again, just to have a sounding board to ensure that whatever proposal that we put out there as alternative makes sense. So we did, we saw the conversation. We've been tracking all conversations that the Kenya government has around trade, and specifically focusing on SMEs. This year, I think we've done three. Number one is just following up the budget making process, because that has a bearing on small businesses. We are also following up on the Continental Free Trade Agreement, and just looking at how can we be able to better place Kenyan SMEs, at least, to be able to tap into this new protocol. The Kenyan government, again, has put out its strategy. Again, that's a conversation that we would follow. We followed tax, and finally this year, at least we hope this might not be the final one, but the one that we currently would focus on is looking at the proposed trade negotiations between US and Kenya. And the reason why we focused on this, again, is just to be able to highlight the challenges, take stock of what the trade between US and Kenya is, take stock at what SMEs are facing in terms of challenges, and based on this, try to figure out what are the priority areas that this agreement should focus on. Yeah. Again, whenever this kind of negotiations take place, usually because SMEs are not as organized, you'd find the people who are discussing about them might not have up-to-date data. They might not be able to articulate very well what the challenges SME face, and highlight that as part of the negotiations that are going on. So, so my presentation would follow basically four parts. Just looking at what this Kenya Strategic Trade Investment Partnership is, what's the state of play in terms of US-Kenya trade in terms of actual numbers, because even as you go towards conversations around trade, it's always good to take stock in terms of numbers, what is actually happening. So how much is being traded across the different countries, what are the issues that at least for Kenya's instance, that SMEs are facing. So before you go to get a solution, you need to be able to take stock and understand the challenges that the particular sector or person is facing. Then probably you can be able to give a prognosis having understood the challenges. So just a brief highlight in terms of the challenges that SMEs face. and an ideal approach in terms of Kenya's approach to the strategic trade investment. And the reason why we say it's fundamental, it's important, is because this question is a test we have with other African countries. So this could be a good prototype, just to be able to learn, and as the US as well as other African countries are going to similar negotiations, it could be a model that can be used. So I think, as Derek had mentioned, Kenya has, I think in this year, they basically announced around, I think, June, conversations that are going to take place between the Ministry of Industry in Kenya and the Office of the United States Trade Representatives, just as a starting point for negotiations. So the negotiations have not started yet. It is just almost like a preamble in terms of announcing that, the US are going to pursue this particular issue, of course, with the different interests being looked out for. So even as the US and Kenya go towards these negotiations, I'm sure there are certain issues that they want to be addressed. So there are certain sectors within the US economy, there are certain sectors within the Kenyan economy that would want to benefit from an arm's length, to a large degree, an arm's length transaction, so that you don't get out of this agreement with the short end of the stick. So from the Kenyan perspective, MSMEs are very important. And the reason why they're important is, if you look at data from Kenya's perspective, we have SMEs being around 98% of all businesses. So that's a super majority. SMEs contribute around 33% to Kenya's GDP. SMEs employ close to 40% of the working population in Kenya. Roughly the last data I had a look at, SMEs employ around 15 million Kenyans out of a population of around 40 million. So that's a very significant number. So again, based on this, then because they are the engine of the economy, because they are the backbone of the economy, SMEs have featured highly in this particular agreement. So looking at the strategic trade investment partnership, the two countries have identified 10 issues that they hope would be addressed through the negotiation process. Of course, we have agriculture. Agriculture is very important for both US as well as Kenya, and just generally in terms of, it becomes something that is very strategic, to some degree can be a security issue. So having agriculture at the center of the conversation is important. Again, if you're to dissect the Kenya's economy, agriculture is the biggest employer. Agriculture contributes around close to 40%. So around 20%, 20% through this, very fundamental to the US economy, as well as Kenya being nascent in terms of innovation and ICT. We have issues around environment and climate action. Of course, this globally, this is a major issue, and it's just trying to triangulate and see how probably the two countries can collaborate and get something going. Issues around regulatory practices. SMEs, as I mentioned, is a key cog to this conversation, both from the US perspective as well as Kenya. We have supporting women and youth in trade, standards collaboration, just seeing how we can be able to upgrade different sectors within the Kenyan economy based on the learnings that the US has. We have trade facilitation and custom procedures. Again, if you look at issues around trade facilitation and custom procedures, again, that forms either a non-trade barrier. If you're not understand how goods and services can move across borders. And I think, as I had Derek mention, that's an area that the Global Chamber is looking at to ensure that trade facilitation and understanding of custom procedures across different borders. That information is readily made available. How 10 issues, of course, we may not be able to on all, just agriculture as well, and just through, what Kenya and you around these three issues can be able to, because it's not how we have trade. So in terms of state of U.S.-Kenya trade, the conversation or relationship between Kenya and the U.S. dates back to post-independence. So that conversation or that relationship went on ice, of course, for a brief period of time up to until 1992, when Kenya expanded its political space through multi-party democracy. Then, of course, that relationship thawed a bit. So in 2018, the conversation between the U.S., at least in terms of trade, was elevated to what is termed as a strategic partnership through the first bilateral strategic dialogue, BSD, which took place in 2019. Of course, this is what is the partnership we are currently having. And I think there and with the US disbursing around $560 million in terms of bilateral assistance to Kenya. Things have changed. Kenya being now deemed a lower middle income country. Of course, the dynamics around bilateral assistance would shift, because now we are more of the US is looking at Kenya more of as a partner rather than just receiving grants and that kind of stuff. In terms of pillars for the PSD, it was looking public health, among others. So you can see the issue around economic prosperity was broad as compared to the strategic trade investment partnership, where economic prosperity has been unpacked, has been broken down, and enables both parties to be able to have a clear understanding, as well as be able to come up with very strong proposals. So that does not mean that Kenya was not, that was the only route that Kenya was using to Kenya is part of the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, a trade preference program where Kenya has been getting preferential. Kenya, of course, is of the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, TIFA, which is a US agreement with the East African Community, as well as the Common Market and Eastern and Southern Africa, which is called COMESA. So Kenya still has those routes that it uses to trade directly with the US. So just briefly, Kenya is currently 96th US 96th largest goods trading partner at 1.1 billion. This basically is trading both ways, both in terms of export as well as imports across both countries. US has invested through FDIs, or foreign direct investment, going to the tune of 353 million. Is 2020. how the different neutral data out there. So these are the three areas, three ways in which Kenya is currently trading with the US through AGOA, through EAC, as well as COMESA under the TIFA framework. So for us, or for Kenya, or for any other country, African country, to be able to understand, or before they go to negotiate, you probably need to understand what is the state of play now. So of course, for the purposes of this session, our focus basically was trade between US and Kenya, and just looking at the US export to Kenya. So this is products that are sold by the US to Kenya, which is what Kenya imports. We see a lot of this being led by, well as cereals or wheat, and in terms of, it's not bad to export, but the whole country and what happens to our farmers. So with this data, probably you can be able to, tick something, and it could just light a bulb in your mind, around wheat. So just doing a drill down on agricultural export to Kenya, we see Kenya importing wheat to the tune of 27 million USD. We see vegetable oils, soybean, etc. We see imports of pulses, the various, pulses. We see coarse grain in the US, maybe you call it corn. Here we call it maize, and we see planting seeds. So this in terms of what largest export market in 2019 by the US to the tune of around 401 million USD worth of goods exported to Kenya. So in terms of imports now, export of from Kenya to the US, or imports from Kenya by the US. Again, Kenya is the 86th largest supplier of goods in 2019 to the US. Exporting goods and services to the tune of 677 million USD. And this is where, even as both countries, or specifically Kenya, because I think Kenya would get a big advantage if they're able to access the US market, is just to see how can we be able to optimize that. So again, the first thing you notice is under agriculture, we see unprocessed agricultural produce. And of course, this is not only a challenge with Kenya, but cuts across Africa. And if you look at, for instance, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area agreement, we see a priority in terms of or member states be able to. So if you're able to add value, it means that probably you can be able to have, you can be able to either double or triple or increase the value of your products by a certain number. But that does not. Is being exported now needs to stop, that we are exporting to the US or any other country. So with an understanding of the numbers and what kind of goods and services are moving across board, from Kenya's perspective, we need to be able to understand what are the challenges that the different issues that have been raised. Out of the 10 issues, like I said, just focusing on 3 or 4. So what are the issues that they face, and how can this framework allow the different actors within the different issues to be assisted, to enable them either to add value to the products that they are currently exporting to the US? How can we be able to leverage on the digital economy? Of course, digital economy manifests in different ways. Whether you look at it from an innovation perspective, whether you look at it from a startup perspective or ICT, just how can we be able to address some of the issues and the bottlenecks that are blocking these sectors from accessing the US market, looking at agriculture in terms of the challenges that would stop players within the agricultural space to enter the US market. Is it issues around regulation? Is it an issue around standards? What do we need to do to ensure that they take advantage of this agreement to allow them to enter the US market? So just if you're to focus on Kenya, and focusing on Kenya is looking at policy and just how, if there are any policy gaps or that would allow or would enable a significant growth of SMEs. So as when we talk about SMEs, as I mentioned, is a lot of or majority of the people we call MSMEs or SMEs, the words are used interchangeably. I think around 79% are informal. So the immediately you're informal, it means that probably you're stuck in terms of there is a ceiling in which you can be able to grow. So we can't, it would not make any sense for us to go with SMEs as is in terms of informality and negotiate with the US. Because if you look at, you wanting to export goods, there's a certain level of standards that are required, and that would mean that you'd have to formalize and have formal business, have formal structures, have quality control, etc., for you to be able to access that market. But even as I say that and put that in abeyance, just focusing on who SMEs are. So in Kenya, from a policy perspective, we have three major documents or legislation or policy documents that govern SMEs. We have what is called the Micro and Small Enterprise Act 2012. And the reason why it's called micro and small enterprises is because we know that the word MSMEs is an acronym. So micro, small, medium enterprises. So again, if you look at data, I think around 90% of SMEs are small and micro. So what that means is, if that's the majority, and government, of course, is looking for impact, then policy intervention would focus on where the majority are. So the specific piece of legislation, the MSME Act 2012, focuses on micro and small enterprises, but it does not mean that medium-sized businesses are not looked after. They are looked after under the same ministry, but with different policy intervention. And I'll mention a bit of that on the next slide. So they are covered under the national trade policy, which basically looks at other actors other than small businesses. So we have Kenya's Vision 2030, which is Kenya's almost like a long-term strategic plan that would allow, that espouses, Kenya to be a middle-income economy by 2030. So again, SMEs have been mentioned as part of the blueprint under the pillar under economy. And most recently is the introduction of the Kenya Micro Small Enterprise Policy. Again, because of intervention across in the last 50 years, missing the mark. So I think the idea was to be able to bring, have one overarching policy looking at SMEs and trying to use that now as almost like a strategic plan to ensure that challenges that SMEs face are addressed in a systematic way. So prior to 2020 or prior to this particular policy coming into place, we saw a lot of sporadic SME intervention. So under different ministries, so you'd find either Ministry of ICT having an intervention towards a small business. You'd have the Ministry of Industry and all manner of ministries doing interventions without it being coherent or having an integrated approach. Of course, that means that the impact of policy or legislation towards SMEs is not as good. Like I mentioned, medium-sized businesses are still under the Ministry of Industry and Trade, which is the ministry that is involved on issues around trade, but addresses medium businesses under the industrial and national industrial policy. So what are the challenges of that SMEs face that, if addressed, would allow them to be able to access not only the US market as well, but other export markets? So again, the data that I'm using as I put out as a caveat is 2016. But at least some of this have been reports. If you're able to address the challenges that they stand a chance to be able to be competitive, both within the Kenyan market as well as export market. And how can we be able to leverage on this particular trade agreement to they are addressed. So in Kenya, we have means, of course, as the economy, but they also face a very high mortality rate of around 75% within the first 3 years. So what that means is 3 out of 5 businesses close within the first 3 years of business of sector contributes highly. They also face a lot of challenges, issues around access to finance, access to market, issues around regulation and policy not being as supportive, issues to do with licenses, and the likes, taxes, etc. So these are documented challenges that have been documented, and different policy as well as legislative interventions have tried to address. And I think having the SME policy 2020 was trying to get a reading in terms of diagnosing the exact problems that SMEs face and trying to develop proposals through legislation to be able to support SMEs. And of course, access to market is a major thorn in the flesh. And we hope that as the Kenyan government goes to negotiate with the US, they can use the challenges that SMEs face as a diagnosis for, and try to find solutions through this agreement. It could come out in terms of capacity building, for example, can maybe different US agencies or organizations or and capacity building sessions with local, access to the technology, etc., and allow SMEs, Kenyan SMEs, to be able to export to the US. That can happen likewise in terms of Kenya or Kenyan businesses or Kenyan agencies, allowing, giving market intelligence to small businesses within the US, or even large corporations, to be able to understand the Kenyan market well and be able to tweak products to allow them to export to the Kenyan market. As I mentioned, agriculture is also another key issue that is almost what we call a sleeping giant. So, of course, Kenyan agriculture performs very well in terms of contributing towards GDP. But the challenge that we have is the focus of agriculture in Kenya is on cash crops. So if you look at the data that I had, enumerated earlier, we see food crop being neglected to the cost. Just a quick literature review, we see that there are certain challenges that that Kenya faces as within the agricultural sector. If you look at, and just looking at food crops, so our productivity is quite low as compared to other countries. We constantly have a deficit of around 10,000, I think 10,000 metric tons of bags of around maize. So we have issues around productivity, and of course there are certain factors that contribute to that. It could be a question of lack of input in terms of average farm size quite small, so you can't be able to get economies of scale. Research within the agricultural space is not good. Extension services is a challenge. Access to market, access to this all is an opportunity for both Kenya and the US to be able to address. What is high as compared, but that does not mean that they cannot be able to have conversations to see how they can have around. Then the next issue, it's been the general knowledge. When we talk about ICT, for instance, mobile technology as a subset of ICT, we see it contributing around 7.1% of GDP, which is growing around 10 billion USD. Both US entities, as well government as well as private entities, to engage in a constructive way to be able to see how they can be able to tap, as well as how Africa can be able to use its local know-how. With Africa being touted as the next growth frontier, how can we maybe, for example, be the US be fast to market to ensure that it works with Kenya and even Africa generally, just to ensure that they are able to get value, and we can see in terms of Kenya's ICT sector, it's ICT in 2017 expanded around 12%. So this expansion has been very consistent. It has not been a significant jump, but it has been quite consistent. And Kenya has realized that and has developed policies as well as legislation to be able to tap into this particular market. Of course, when we mention ICT in Kenya or innovation in Kenya, the first thing that comes to mind is M-Pesa. But if you look at global indicators, we see that Kenya has even a much greater opportunity to potential to grow as a digital ICT hub. I don't know. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you. It's coming a little bit in and out.
Okay, sorry about that.
And Derek, I personally can hear you, Derek, and getting a lot of noise every time you mute yourself. I don't know if I'm the only one getting that.
Noise.
Yeah, there's like a spooky sound. It sounds like a horror
Derek,
movie.
Derek, well, check your mic when you can, and Victor, go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
Okay, no, in case there's anything that we can probably can just pick it up in the Q&A. So just in terms of digital economy, just summarize this point is, if you look at global indicators, global innovation index, system adoption index, and different indices, they indicate that Kenya is doing very well in terms of its performance. Just if you're to focus on sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya accounts for around 17% of all VC money coming into Africa. Of course, we are only second to, I think, Egypt, probably Nigeria. Yeah, but we see that Kenya is really doing well, despite lack of optimal, policy as well as the legislation. But of course, Kenya is just making strides towards the same. We currently have the startup bill, and Nigeria has overtaken us on this. We currently have the startup bill in parliament, we hope that with the new government or the new president coming into play, we should be able to see maybe that being enacted, and us using the startup bill as a gateway for supporting startups in the country. So in terms of regulation, because again, this is one of the issues that has been highlighted as under the Strategic Trade Investment Partnership, looking at what we call the National Industrialization Policy. So this is a policy, this basically the way, of course, if you know issues around policy is government would look at a challenge within a certain sector, diagnosis of the challenge, use the policy document as a sounding block in terms of giving solutions, and these policy documents is where we get legislation policy 2012, which again was focusing on import substitution as a way to develop the economy. There are different interventions that came out of that. I probably might not just go through that. Having gone through that 2012 up to 2016, the Kenyan government realized that import substitution might not be the best way to develop the economy. Again, it came up with the National Trade Policy 2016, which was trying to improve on the previous policy, and the focus here was around being a player within the export, within the global economic through exporting based on the competitive advantage that Kenya has. And if you look again at for instance, the Africa Trade Agreement or strategy by Kenya, it really relies on these two policy documents to inform our strategy towards Africa. Again, as I mentioned, just to unpack this, is Kenya has the small enterprise policy 2020. Again, just looking at how it can be able to address some of the challenges that SMEs face. And the reason why I put out this, it might sound boring and it looks boring, and I know. The reason why I put these documents out there is because these are the things that inform trade negotiations. Trade negotiations, they don't come out of thin air. It has to be founded on some policy of sorts. So we can use, or Kenya can use these policies to, because they require resources. For instance, if we say we want to, address the issue of licenses, to automate the application and payment of licenses, that would require resources. If you say, for example, you need to enable SMEs to access markets, again, that would require resources. So even as Kenya goes to these negotiations, if they can be able to leverage on the challenges that we face and see how we can be able to get resources either through trade or through bilateral support, then probably that can be able to put Kenya in a much better place.
Victor, I just wanted to see if we could pause there for a second. I have one eye on the clock, and I'm sure we have people who have a couple of questions. I'll give you an opportunity to sort of recap everything that you have shared with us. You've shared with us a lot of information. It's a lot to take in. But I want to also, I'm cognizant of the fact that there may be one or two questions, and we might be coming to a hard stop at the top of the hour. So I'm going to encourage anyone who has any questions or indeed wants to add to this debate just to unmute themselves and ask some questions. I apologize for my mic earlier. Please, and Victor, thank you very much. It's been very comprehensive, and I actually hope you can share some of that material with us. Very comprehensive. I really do appreciate that. You truly have a wealth of knowledge. All right, guys. I can see a question. A hand has been raised by Professor Robina. Professor Robina, please unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. Mine is just a simple question. How we are part of the EAC, how can Global Chamber Kenya maybe work with us. Well, I'm not yet Global Chamber anywhere, maybe partner in the upcoming summit next month, the Trans-Africa Investment Summit. But how can we forge a way forward? Because I think that program is very fabulous and massive, but I just see it at the moment, maybe, yeah, some drop in a notion that can be maybe expounded on by involvement of stakeholders within the region.
Okay, so Professor Rubino, your question is about how the Global Chamber can work with your organization. I think that's a conversation that either myself or Doug will have with you.
Oh yes, especially especially within the East African region. Yes, yeah.
Okay, I think we can talk about that offline after this meeting is over, and we'll discuss how the Global Chamber can work closer with your organization and particularly the event that you have coming up in Kampala, I think in a few weeks. All right. Any other questions, particularly to do with this particular trade deal, or indeed any others? In fact, Victor, I wanted to find out from you, because AGOA was started with much fanfare, but it kind of petered out. And I remember in 2019, the levels were really, really low. And I don't know if that had to do with the fact that, you know, the value add that a program like AGOA was supposed to sort of initiate kind of died out. In fact, there are countries like Ethiopia that dropped out. So what makes this trade deal or any other trade deals any different? And also factors like China and so on and so forth. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so just like any other trade deal, I think the shortcomings around, so we got this opportunity to be able to access the US market. And of course, for you to be able to maximize that, it means you need to be able to have proper legislation as well as proper support in terms of financial mechanism to allow you to be able to fully explore that particular market. And I think what Kenya chose was textile through the export processing zone. So that's what Kenya decided to go with, assuming that that's where we have the most competitive advantage. Because if you are to start up a new sector and try to access AGOA, that became difficult. The beauty with this, I think, is because the issues are very specific. So we are looking at issues around SME, looking at issues around agriculture, and these two alone is half of Kenya's GDP. So I think he is more granular, you know, in the sense that it really addresses the real issues that you know, the Kenyan economy faces, and especially now that you know, coming out of COVID and coming out of a grueling electioneering period, I think this, I suspect, stands as a better opportunity as compared to AGOA.
All right, thanks for that, Victor. You know, Victor, this is the Global Chamber. We have people here representing all four corners of Africa, South Africa, West Africa. I wonder, can you speak a little bit about trade agreements, perhaps with the rest of Africa and the US, and indeed, you know, how that is going to spur sort of particularly this SME sector in Africa?
So I think currently the go-to word is the Continental Free Trade Area. So of course, you know, with AU's spearheading this as part of Agenda 2063, CFTA is a platform for Africa to increase its intertrade, you know, its intra-country trade, which I think is less than, I think, 20% as compared to, you know, Asia, which has inter-country trade of around 65%. So this is where we are as Africa in terms of, you know, can we be able to maximize the trade within the continent and use that as a platform to be able to negotiate with other trade blocs such as EU, you know, Asian Tigers, etc.
Okay, I see a question here in the chat. Which countries do you think hold the most promise for
It's
collaboration?
an opportunity. Again, the danger we have is that we don't have collaboration within Africa. I'm not sure about the question. You're saying which countries hold the most promise
for collaboration in the next 5 years, and which sectors?
Yeah, so collaboration, I think within the CFTA is within the the regional building blocks. So for example, in Kenya, we have the East Africa community, which we still are trying to increase trade within the region. I don't think there is a specific answer for that. It's a question of can you be able to engage, because opportunities are there. It's only that we have both trade and non-trade barriers that are dissuading us from trading. And I think if that is addressed, and if different stakeholders are able to engage, because the challenge we have is currently that the CFTA and COMESA has been left for government only, as a government only conversation, with the different actors, such as Global Chamber, as well as different actors are not engaging to really push government to ensure that some of these inter-country trade challenges or barriers are removed. So I think that's where the opportunities are, in terms of, can we be able to push back and enable and push our governments to allow them to be able to open, trade across borders, and of course the opportunities are boundless. But in terms of sectors that we've seen and we see that have potential, of course we have manufacturing, we have agriculture, as well as innovation, which is led by startups. So those are the three traditional sectors that have grown, even countries such as China, US, etc. What is happening in Africa? We only have Egypt and South Africa as the people who are recognized as manufacturing hubs. So if that is cascaded or trickles down to the different countries, and of course the opportunities are endless within these three sectors.
Okay, so folks, we've reached the top of the hour. I'm just going to continue this conversation for a few more minutes. So please feel free to unmute, ask Victor a question, and so that we can, just make sure that everybody gets the most out of his expertise and a conversation like this with all of us here. So please don't be bashful. All right, I can see a question in the chat from Komi. Komi's asking, how could African SMEs become competitive by accessing affordable business capital?
So different entities or different governments have tried different options. I think the idea of having a fund has proved to be a failure, a huge failure, in the sense of government trying to set up a fund to be able to give small businesses. Again, government's business is enabling policy, not lending. So I think the new model that is being adopted is the model of credit guarantee scheme. What that basically means is government trying to de-risk small businesses by partnering with banks, and Kenya has piloted such a program where government would have a fund and would tell banks that you can be able to extend a loan to a small business, maybe for example to the tune of $100, and we will de-risk maybe $800 out of maybe $8 out of 100. And if in case the SME fails to pay, we will refund you to that amount. I think that kind of a model is what we are seeing being deployed. Again, it's just a wait and see, but I think it's the most optimal option in terms of giving access to small businesses, both in Kenya as well as Africa.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, folks, any other questions you'd like to engage Victor? I've also seen in our meeting, we've been joined by Danielle Orcutt, and we had a great conversation with Danielle earlier last week. And I wanted her to talk a little bit, just for a couple of minutes, about some of the work that she's doing to help with international payments, buying and selling currencies. There was something really interesting that I thought would be of interest to everyone in this meeting. So Danielle, I know you came on, I don't know if you just jumped off. I saw you taking a phone call. If you just want to just unmute yourself and just introduce yourself for a couple of minutes. Danielle, go for it.
So much. much. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, everyone. My phones are always ringing. So I was speaking to Derek and other members of the Global Chamber about how I'm trying to assist companies trade with Africa. Be it, you know, they're in the States, they have an office in the US or Canada, and they need to buy goods or services from Africa, and they need to pay in the local currency. That's what we can help companies do, is buy the African currency and send it to Africa. Or we can receive currency. We can only receive the rand and the shilling. So say, you know, there's maybe offices in Africa that need to send money to the States. We can receive that, or there's clients in Africa that need to send their local currency. We can receive that, convert to US dollars, and give it to the companies here. So why people would use us, we offer, you know, competitive exchange rates on all these different currencies. So many different African currencies compared to maybe a bank. And we give a dedicated trader to our clients that truly understands Africa and all the different currencies that go there. So, you know, if anyone needs help with that or knows any companies that we do all different currencies too, not just the African ones, just so you know. We offer over 145 currencies.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danielle. You've put your contacts in the chat, so if anyone wants to connect with you, they can do so there. Victor, I'm just going to bring you in to kind of wrap up. Give us your final thoughts. Victor, are you there? If you could just sum up your sum up your presentation going forward, particularly with this administration. By the way, if something happens, obviously we have the midterms coming up in America, but say in 2 years, we get another administration or a previous administration that comes back into power. Do you think that's going to change this particular trade agreement?
I don't think so, because trade agreements are protocols that are based in law. You know, even if you look at, maybe, for example, the Africa Continental Trade Area, is the different member states had to anchor that engagement in law. So there can be a bit of tweaking, but the issues that have been raised and are being addressed through a trade agreement is not subject to change.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Just give us your final thoughts, and then we can wrap this.
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge that I see in Kenya and in Africa is the different business BMOs, what we call business member organizations. So, you know, such as, you know, Global Chamber, you know, Kenya National Chamber of Commerce, KEPSA, etc. There is a lot of advocating for member issues. I think for me that is a shortcoming that we see as a research entity, as a think tank. And I think that my challenge is to, you know, Global Chamber is to be able to engage in the different spaces that you are in, to ensure that, you know, some of these policy or systemic challenges that small businesses face are addressed.
Fantastic. Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. We had some people who had to drop off, obviously. They had other things that they needed to attend to, but I hope this conversation has been enlightening. Victor, I'm sure you're going to share some of that material with us, and our purpose to share it with everybody else that's been a part of this. Kindly do put your contact information in the chat. And I am now going to, I think, bring this meeting to a close, unless there are any protocols that I haven't observed. Doug and Cesar, are we good to go? Doug, did you want to say anything?
Oh, thank you. Great information, great presentation. We'd love to get a copy of what you presented. Victor, that would be great. And then our next event is in 1 hour on Latin America. business. And then, and actually, let's see, I think in about 4 hours, our Global Chamber Atlanta is interviewing Captain Bill Pinkney. I believe he was the first African American to circle the globe by boat on his own. So I'm just learning about him. I recognize his name, but it sounds like an amazing story. And so Dana Austin, who some of you know at Global Chamber, and she's extraordinary, one of our executive directors, is leading that interview. So I don't know what happened, but suddenly yesterday we got the opportunity for Dana to talk to Captain Pinkney. And so we're going to be speaking with him. Dana will be in a few hours. So jump into that. It wasn't in the newsletter. It's a brand new event that just happened, and I encourage you to learn about that. These days of trade require your courage, and undoubtedly he has demonstrated an amazing amount of courage to make the impact that he did. And Derek and Victor, you two both also are pushing through a lot of uncertainty to create progress. So thank you for your work, and I turn it back to you, Derek, to close the room.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug. All right, thanks, folks. Stay well, be safe, and we will see you at the next meeting. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.